Welcome back to the Remote No Pressure Podcast. I'm so happy to be back. I'm so every week I'm just so excited to be behind the microphone. You know, this week is a little bit different because I don't know if you heard a couple of podcasts ago, but Wild Bill was actually exposed to coronavirus. And last week, he was actually diagnosed COVID positive. And so he has been sick. He has been out. He's got the Rona. And I really feel awful for him. He's feeling better. By the time this airs, he'll probably be back 100%. But send him some love on our Facebook or YouTube page because Wild Bill does not have social media. You're not going to find him anywhere. So be sure to go online and just give him a quick shout out. I'm sure he feels great right now. A couple house cleaning things. If you're currently on the YouTube channel right now, if you take a look, I am currently wearing our Fly Fishing is Dead t-shirt. And of all the shirts that we have, this one is my absolute favorite design. It was hand-drawn, and it is an incredible feel. It's soft. It's comfortable. It's just an amazing shirt. We have these for sale right now. Anytime you go online and purchase something from us, be it a shirt or a decal or something, you're just helping the podcast go. We don't do the Patreon thing. We don't do exclusive content. We don't do any of that stuff. But because I'm kind of old school, I feel like when you buy something, there should be an exchange of goods, and that's just that's how we are, and that's how we operate. And also, we are a fly fishing company founded by bootstraps, not on trust funds. So everything that we do, even if you take a look, like, why don't you guys have better cameras? Or why don't you have? It's because everything we're doing is bootstraps, you know. And there's a lot of fly anglers that are like that, you know. And that's why we have the Fly Fishing is Dead. Fly fishing is available to everyone, you know. Just because you can't or won't buy a $2,000 Yeti cooler or anything doesn't mean you can't go fly fishing. Fly fishing is for everyone, whether you have a trust fund or not. If you have a trust fund, like we've said before, and you want to make a donation, we'd happy to take it. But everything we do is from our own pocket. So if you go online and take a look at our Fly Fishing is Dead shirt, it's my favorite one. But some of our Sasquatch shirts as well. Decals, we have quite a few things there at different price points. So anytime you buy something from us, it really helps support. We really appreciate everything that you guys do. You've showed tremendous support over the last few months. With Corona, we lost a lot of our sponsors. So everything's been really wild. It's been a wild summer. So be sure to go online and then check us out. Speaking of our t-shirt designs and our Sasquatch designs, we did a contest on Instagram where people could go online and you could name the Sasquatch, and you didn't have to do anything to be entered to win. You didn't even have to really come up with a name. You just had to make a comment, and we were able to give a shirt away to whoever, you know, commented and created some hype around this shirt, you know. The name we went with, that we're going with, it was actually one of the first names up there, and it was from the Full-Time Blonde, our Dr. Full-Time Blonde, excuse me. She named it Scooter, and right away we're like, that's the name. Scooter is it. So Scooter is the name of our mascot, of our Bigfoot mascot. So we'll be sure to send out a free t-shirt to Dr. Full-Time Blonde, who's actually been on the podcast before. So I was really kind of hoping it was someone else, but the name was just so stinking good. And also we drew some names as well. And Mr. Jack wrote, you're going to be receiving a free t-shirt also. So in the mail, we're going to be sending that out to you. So thank you guys so much for your participation. And thank you all for being part of that. So it's really cool that our Sasquatch now has a name, right? Because for so long he's just been the Squatch or Bigfoot. I mean, if I was part of the human race, you know, people didn't know me; they just call me human. But really, I'm Jeff. You know, I am Jeff, and you know, our guy is named Scooter. His name is Scooter. He's got a name now. You know, it's going to be around for a while. So go to our podcast. So stupid. So dumb. It's so weird coming here by myself without Wild Bill next to me. There's no jokes. They're not so funny anymore. You know, I'm not as quick. There's no one like, you know what I mean? There's no one there. Well, if you are watching us on the YouTube channel or wherever you're at, be sure to click subscribe down below as well on our YouTube channel. Click subscribe. Every subscriber helps. It helps us get toward our monetizing. So be sure to go on there. Now, this week in other news, an 11-year-old boy, this is per TMZ, and as you guys know, TMZ is a reputable news source. You guys want to know, what's going on with any kind of celebrity. I mean, even if I take a look, Lil Tay, custody battle looms. Lil, people like that. People with names like Lil, Lil. Lil Tay, custody battle. We got Tristan Thompson versus Nick Cannon. Who do you rather? Shirtless work. I mean, these are the kind of things. Chrissy Teigen and John Legend slowly getting back to normal life. Patriotic voter preps for long poll lines with chair and snacks. I mean, my God. Okay, anyways, back to this week's article. See what I mean? All of a sudden, I just get sucked right in. Lil Tay custody battle, because really what's keeping me up at night, it's not this election. It's really not. It's not our democracy. It's not how it hangs in the balance. It's not. I mean, it's really what's really on my heart at night when I'm laying down by myself is, how's Lil Tay? How's the custody battle going for Lil Tay? And I know if I go to TMZ, I can find out what's going on with Lil Tay in the custody battle. Her career path really hangs in the balance. But this week on the Remote No Pressure podcast, on in other news, 11-year-old boy busted for jacking school bus, went on a joyride, cops say. Cops say the kid taunted and flipped off officers as they gave chase before eventually crashing into a tree. The real miracle here is the kid was okay and was immediately arrested. Cops say he also hit 3 other vehicles along the way, but no one was seriously hurt. You guys can go online and check it out. It was really funny, the headline, but when you see the kid in handcuffs, you can't see his face because he's a minor, right? But he's in handcuffs. It's like, wow. I don't mean to bring the heavy, right? But what's going on in that kid's life that he feels like he needs to steal a school bus? I think that's the most heartbreaking thing. So I know we were all laughing, but what's funny is I can just see this 11-year-old kid flipping off the cops. And they're like, what is going on? A school bus in Louisiana, down in Louisiana. You just never know what's going to happen down there. It's a crazy state. I don't know if we have any listeners in Louisiana, would you please shoot me an email? I really want to know. But I love Louisiana. As some of you know, I grew up near Toledo Bend. Well, the first 10 years of my life over by Toledo Bend, which is on the border of Texas and Louisiana. So we were always in Louisiana, but my dad lives over almost to Beaumont. So, I'm from kind of that area. And once you get into Louisiana, it's another world, man. You just never know what to expect. It's wild. But I don't know any other 11-year-old boys in Louisiana stealing school buses. So that is kind of weird. Kind of funny, but kind of sad at the same time. Most great stories are kind of tragic and funny, You see those masks, it's the smiley face, it's the sad face, for the thespians. So maybe that, it's kind of sad, but yet it's kind of funny. I don't know. I digress. Don't mean to bring the heavy if you're listening to this on Monday morning on the way to work and just philosophizing. Is that a word? Philosophizing about an 11-year-old kid driving a school bus. You don't want to hear that. You want to hear about fly fishing. That's what you came here for. And today, with no exception, we're going to talk about fly fishing. We got from the Fiberglass Manifesto, Mr. Cameron Mortenson, again this week on the Remote No Pressure podcast. I'm very excited to have Cameron on. He was on, I think it was second season or first season even. And I really didn't understand all the hype about glass rods. This summer, and you can click down below for a link. This summer, I got a Fiberglass, one of Barclay's fly rods, and it's just unbelievable. And the worst part about it is I got to eventually move up because it's fall fishing is here, so I can't use a 3-weight. And oh my gosh, it's just an amazing rod. So I understand now. And we go into a little detail. I got another rod I found in my wife's grandfather's garage. And he talks a little bit about how to load the weight and all of that, weighted lines and why it's not casting right. So he goes into a lot of detail for that. So it's really a very informative interview, but also it means a lot. How he started that Fiberglass Manifesto, how it all got started, and where he is today. And it's just a really cool story. So welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, cool. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, I'm very excited to have Mr. Cameron Mortenson. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, Cameron. He's waving, so if you're not on the YouTube, you need to go on the YouTube and check out Cameron's wave. Now, Cameron, before we get started, I noticed you just pulled up a tumbler. You're taking a sip. You have whiskey in there? Is that what's in there? Or what are you drinking
I'm doing a throwback to my time on Beaver Island, and there's a company in Michigan that makes a gin where they actually source all of the juniper berries from Beaver Island.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm at the end of a bottle, and so I'm finishing it off tonight on the podcast.
That's excellent because we are in Michigan. Which company is it? Is it Grand Traverse?
I knew it's Long something Distillery.
Okay.
Let me look.
Long Road. Is it Long Road Distillery?
Long Road Distillery.
Yeah.
Yep. They make a Michigan, and that gin is made with junipers that are made they go and source them on Beaver Island to make that gin.
I love that distillery. They're great. They're not too far from here. And then I think they got a distillery in Saugatuck, which is down the street from my house. And then they're further south, but I didn't know that they did that. So I'll have to pick some of that. So that's great. A perfect choice. Now, before we hopped on the podcast, I noticed that you were all alone tonight at home, and there was this huge hunk of meat on your Instagram page. Was that a ribeye?
So yeah, if I'm home alone, it's more likely than not, I'm going to get a thick cut ribeye. I'm going to get some potatoes, and I'm going to throw them on the Traeger. And so I got off work a little early today, ran to our local butcher, and did a little grocery shopping. And so it's been just a relaxing evening, getting ready for the podcast.
That's amazing. Well, I hope you're nice and relaxed. It's funny because I do the same thing. When my wife's not around, it's always steak. It's always steak and like potatoes, and there might be a salad, but it's not very large, and some whiskey. That's like my choice, or a good beer. We have so many great beers in Michigan. Now you come out to Beaver Island every year, is that right, Cameron?
So that's a trip that I've been making for this summer was actually 10 years, and it was kind of weird because of COVID,
right? Of
course. So I was up there mostly by myself, but I had a friend that came over that was actually up in Michigan, living at his in-laws' place, and he flew over a couple days, and then my wife came up for the back half of the trip. So instead of it being a hosted trip where typically there's 4 of us up there with 2 guides, Captain Kevin Morlock came over, and he scheduled out 1 month where he worked every day that month. And so I kept my 7 days, and it was great to be able to support him. And it was fun to just get back up to the island, even though it was really weird this year.
Yeah. A lot of our guides were really affected by COVID, especially in Michigan. I mean, we weren't allowed to put boats in the, in the water with motors on them at one point. But you could without, so you could do a drift boat, but you couldn't use a boat with, and then, no one knew what was going on. So it's like, should we go fishing? Should we not? I mean, it really was there at first. No one knew, how bad that we could be affected. So I know a lot of people were affected in a negative way. So that's cool. We'll put, do you always use the same, you said Kevin, what was his name?
Yeah, so Kevin Morlock was the one that kind of, I'm going to say he found that fishery around Beaver Island and the barrier islands that are around there. And that's been going on for like 15 years. For the last 10 years, I've been going up there every summer, and I've hosted a trip. And so it was great to get back. And usually there's at least 2 or 3 guides there that all work together. But this summer, Kevin wanted to try to make, a busy month of being there, even though they're usually there about 3 months.
Right.
And so he was able to load up 30 days of work, and it's just such a neat fishery. I mean, crazy smallmouth and pike. And then of course, carp on the fly. That's a very flat setting. So, it's, you're casting to carp that you're looking over the water, and it's very much like you could be in the Bahamas or Belize, and, you're casting to carp that are either tailing or they're cruising in water that's like 2 to 4 feet.
Yeah. People think, when they think about Michigan, and Michigan is an unbelievable state for fishing. And, they think about the Asable. They think about the Pierre Marquette, they think about these awesome, famous rivers, the Two-Hearted, which, whatever. But Hemingway writes about it. And there's all these awesome rivers that are world famous here, Cameron. But people don't understand really what's going on the other side. Like we have an awesome smallmouth fishery on the southeast side of the state as well. And then, the islands, I took my kids up to the North Channel of Lake Huron this year, up in the UP. And you're right. I mean, when you're there, it looks like you are in the Bahamas. It looks like the water's stupid cold. It's not something that, where we were, you don't even want to get in the water, but people don't really know about that. It's not as famous as the Asable River, you know. How did you come across that? How did you find the smallmouth fishery? Were you just thinking around the internet, or how 10 years ago, how did that come about?
So I grew up in Michigan, and 20 years ago I moved. My wife and I got married, and we found our way back to where she's from in South Carolina. And I believe Kevin and Steve, who are the two guides that are on Beaver Island, they hosted a media event. And I had messaged Steve. I didn't know him. And I was like, hey, if you guys ever do something like this again, I'd love to get invited. And he's like, hey, if you're going to be around in Michigan this summer, come over and see me. So I actually flew over there that summer. I usually take like a week to 2 week trip up to Michigan in the summer to hang out with family and just to come up there and fly fish. And so at the tail end of a trip where I was up in the UP and kind of all over the place, the last day that I spent fishing, flew over to Beaver Island, fished all day. It was phenomenal smallmouth fishing. Like the first half of the day was gray. We couldn't see any fish. And then I'll never forget at lunchtime, we stopped and had lunch. It was gray and kind of raining. And over the course of that 30 minutes that we ate lunch, the sky opened up. It was sunny. And I'll never forget Steve saying, we're going to go back to the first 3 flats that we were fished, and there's going to be smallmouth all over the place. We rounded the corner on that first flat, and it was like little black submarines just like peppered across the flat, like in onesie, twosie, threesies. And they were all like 3 to 5 pound fish. And it's hard for people to understand that. I mean, like legit,
right? Like
3 to 5 pound fish that were like peppered all over this flat. And he's like, all right, don't freak out. We're going to start over here. We're going to work our way across. And I mean, over the course of like 3 hours, we caught a phenomenal amount of fish, several fish, like between 5 and 6 pounds. And like, I was like completely blown away. Like we flew back over at the end of the day, a friend and I, and like totally just mind blown. And so the next summer I did like a 3 or 4 day trip. And then after that, there's so much weather that happens on Lake Michigan that if you do a 3 or 4 day trip and then a storm moves in or high winds move in and you can't fish, well then you might do a 3 day trip and like get weathered on 2 days, only get to fish 1 day. I'm like, skip this. So we started renting the house for 7 days, actually 8 days, and we do 7 days of fishing. So typically we get weathered out 1 or 2 days over the week. Every now and then we'll get to fish all 7 days. But the island's cool. I mean, it's got a great vibe. There's lots to do. There's lots to see. Or you just hang out at the house and just on a weather day, you make a Bloody Mary bar, you cook. I mean, you just have, it's just kind of like a week-long boys club with whoever comes. It's going to be a good time. If you get to fish all 7 days, great. If not, it's one of those trips that I do every year. So you just kind of know what to expect. It might be great fishing the whole time. It might be tough fishing, but it's a week that I look forward to every year. That's
amazing. Now, you probably told me, but do you realize, I mean, it was almost 2 years ago that you were on the podcast. So sorry if I forgot, but you're from the east side of Michigan, right? You're from the east side of the state, or where are you from originally?
Well, I grew up in Grand Ledge, Lansing area.
Sure.
And then I went to school down in West Michigan. And then I spent summers, there's 4 summers that I spent up at Camp Asable at a Christian summer camp up there. So,
oh, wow.
Kind of all over the place and, spent a lot of time traveling around. And then now, every year, like this summer, spent a week on Beaver Island and then grabbed the family. And we did, even with COVID, we tried to take a really careful and responsible week of travel. Started in, we went all the way up to the UP, went all the way up to Marquette, spent a couple of days there and kind of worked our way back to Traverse City and Petoskey and just had a great time. People don't know it, that Michigan just has so much to offer. It's really a Midwest hidden secret. I mean, there's just so much to do there. Yeah. I mean, we talked about the fishing, but as far as just recreation and just things for a whole family to do, I mean, Michigan's got it all.
Yeah, they do. Being born and raised in Texas, I'm a Texan at heart, but it's a great place to raise a family. Being born and raised in Houston with the traffic and everything, and here it's like the only traffic I have is like a combine harvester every once in a while. Because I don't live in Grand Ledge. I live like right next to a cornfield, a suburb of Grand Rapids. So every great band, if I want to see a concert, if I want to see something, it's literally 15 minutes down the road and you're in downtown Grand Rapids, and it is growing. And I think that's part of the reason. Cost of living is relatively inexpensive, and it's a cool place. If you can get past like in West Michigan, it's cloudy like 6 months out of the year, but even like, Mackinac Island, and that like cool things that it's just, I never heard about it as a kid growing up in Texas, and you get here and like, holy cow, this is pretty amazing.
What's funny is living in South Carolina now for 20 years. If we have like 3 days of clouds, like the radio announcers will talk about how they're depressed and they don't, and it just cracks me up because Michigan in the wintertime, you can go 45 days and never see the sun. It's just a blanket of gray clouds every day. So I enjoy my time in Michigan, but I will say that maybe I've gotten soft. There was a few years ago that I did the Midwest show that's in Detroit area.
Sure.
So that's in March, and it like got super cold, and I went over to the Pier Marquette and fished with Steve for a couple days, and it was frigid cold and snowy and like blizzard conditions, and it snowed all the way down till I got to Lexington, Kentucky, because I always make that straight shot home.
Oh, sure.
It's like 12 or 14 hours. And then I pulled in the driveway in South Carolina. And so I left, and it was like in the teens, and I pull in the driveway and I jump out and it's 70 degrees. And I was like, maybe South Carolina winters aren't so bad after all. So it's fun to visit, but I do enjoy coming home and being able to grill out and wear shorts 12 months a year down here.
Yeah. It's awesome. Like, I'd love that here come after the holidays. Cause growing up in Texas, we didn't have snow on the holidays, so the holidays to me, it's still a novelty, the fall, the snow. So that's great for me. But once January 2nd comes around, I'm like, no, I'm done. Get me the heck out of here. I can't take it, I will say 2 years ago when we first talked, I believe it was Aaron Reed or someone had told me, you need to talk to Cameron Mortenson. You need to have him on your show. And I know that, it's a Fiberglass Manifesto. And so I had you on, and I really didn't understand your passion for fiberglass. I didn't really understand why you felt the need to write a manifesto. That's quite a commitment for you. So this past summer, I was down in Texas, and Aaron Reed puts one of Barclay's rods in my hand, 6 foot, 3-weight. And I own that rod now. And the worst part about the season changing and bigger fish means I got to put this thing down, and I don't want to put the rod down because there's some small creeks that I fish up here for brookies, and the thing is 6 foot long, and it's a 3-weight, and I am fishing, and I love fiberglass. I am absolutely a diehard fiberglass fan at this point. Now it's like I want all glass because because it was just amazing, because Chris, you went down and fished with him recently, and the rod is just, I can't explain it. It's so easy to fish with. Like, anyways.
The story I always tell people is that, and I don't try to push fiberglass rods on people. I fish with, a lot of different friends, and they fish graphite rods. I'll fish glass rods, but I fished with our pediatrician on a local river, and I brought an 8 foot 5-weight. He brought a fast action 3-weight, which doesn't make sense to me anyway, because like if you're fishing a 3-weight, you really need a full flex rod anyway. But so he's fishing his 3-weight, and we'd fish for it, in a couple hours. And then I was like, hey, you should try this rod. And he picked it up, and he did one back cast, and he did a forward cast, and he just yells out of the river. He's like, whoa. He's like, I could feel that rod load. It just like blew his mind. And so I'm a total nerd for glass rods. So from 1-2 weights all the way up to 12 weights and 2-handers, I realize not everybody is going to be that way. But for certain things, they really do make the experience that much greater. If you're fishing brook trout water, if you're fishing trout water, if you're on, maybe a little smallmouth, favorite smallmouth haunt with a 6-weight, you're going to have a better experience with a glass rod.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're starting to see that. And if there's a for sale sign on all your graphite rods, I was there 12 years ago. I mean, 12, 14 years ago, I did the same thing. All my graphite rods I sold off, and I started replacing them one by one with glass rods. And, I've been writing this month, actually September, I've been writing TFM for 12 years.
Wow.
And it's really been interesting to see like how many people have really gotten into fishing glass and the reasons and the ways that they fish glass and what they fish them for. It's not all guys fishing 3 weights for brook trout. It's really across the entire spectrum of everything that you can catch fish on flies on. Guys are doing it with glass, which is pretty neat to see.
That's really awesome. Now, this past spring, my wife's step grandfather, complicated family, like so many listeners, we all have complicated families, right? Step grandfather was just giving away everything. He's like, his wife had died. He's like, come and get what you want, because what you don't get, I'm putting in an estate sale, And so it's very odd when you don't know a person very well and they're like, just come take whatever you want. It's like, I don't want to do that. Like, it's it's awkward, It's like, well, this is really nice, and take it. And it's like, okay. But anyways, so I had like a basket for my wife in my hand and like a plant water or something super cheap. And like, I was just like, okay, cool. Thanks. But in the corner of the garage was this tin rod holder, it was like made out of tin or something. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And I opened it up, and it was a fiberglass rod from his dad. So it's my wife's step great grandfather's fiberglass rod, and it was Wright and something else. You've Wright and
McGill.
Wright and McGill, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like probably a 6 weight. There's no weight written on it, So I'm kind of excited that you're here because I'm going to pick your brain a little bit. So I took it out for smallies this year because at the end of summer, I fished Barclay's rod all summer because I still don't want to get the stupid thing up. But I'm like, it's the end of summer, that one time when you're like, okay, screw it. I'm just going to try weird stuff, new places. I'll try a different rod because it's the end of summer. It's kind of one of those trips that you're just like, I'm just going to try whatever I want to try, So I take this rod out and it was really hard to cast. It was almost like I had to use my hips a lot. And because I would throw my arm out because the rod was so thick and big, Is that a quality rod? Is there something I'm doing wrong on that? Maybe I'm not casting it right.
Well, what's the length of the rod?
I think it's an 8 foot.
Yeah. So I would say that's probably a 7 or maybe even a 8 weight.
Okay.
So I would go up a line weight or 2 and see if I would do 2 things. Start with a 7 weight line. Okay. Maybe even 8 weight line, and then just let the rod do the work. So it's interesting when I watch people fish graphite, they're trying to like do all the work.
Yeah.
Because the rod, might be only bending like at the very tip, because the rod is so stiff, where glass, you're going to get that full flex. Like, take advantage of that rod doing the work.
Okay.
And, do your back cast, let the rod completely load. And it probably just needs another line weight or 2 to load that rod. And you'll probably have a different experience with it.
I think so too. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'm going to do that. I'm going to report back to you, Cameron, on that.
Because, really, when it comes down to it, like back in the day, like is it great grandfather? Is that what you were saying?
Uh-huh.
So like an ultralight rod in those days was a 5 weight. Like 50 years ago, they didn't have 3 weights. Right. They didn't have 4 weights. They didn't have 2 weights. So like the ultralight was like a 5 weight. Most of your rods were like that 6, 7, 8 weight was, what most people used for all applications. So it really wasn't until like at the end of the time where fiberglass was really popular, they were starting to work on more like 5 and 4 weights. But then graphite came. And a real advantage to graphite was that it was lighter and that they could get more slender blanks out of it. Using graphite, they could make these lighter line weights. and then kind of glass kind of came up behind it, with that idea of making those lighter line weight rods. So now, there's a lot of like 1, 2, 3, 4 weight glass rods, but 50 or 60 years ago, that ceiling for what rods was typically, around a 5 weight.
What instigated that change? What brought those new things to market? Was there just a demand, or was someone like Chris Barkley dinking around in their basement and they're like, hey, I think this is better? Or how did that, I don't know if you know about that, but what's the evolution of that?
So there was a transition, where just materials, like, you came up, just like when, most fly rods were made out of bamboo, and then somebody, typically it happened during wartime, the advent of fiberglass, and then somebody put their thinking cap on and said, hey, I think we can build fishing rods out of this. And so where bamboo rods were kind of painstakingly made, there was a lot of steps to it. You had to source bamboo material. They're like, hey, we can make fly rods out of fiberglass. They're going to be cheaper to make. They're super strong. And that same transition happened with graphite, where it was a new material that was lighter. The modulus was faster. You could create these longer rods where graphite, you could go past 8 foot with a rod, where with fiberglass rods, and I think you said with your Wright and McGill rod, that rod's 8 foot long.
Right.
So that was kind of a long rod back in the day in a lighter line weight. And there was a lot of like 8, 9, and 10 weights and 9 foot. But, you jump over to graphite, which you could make a 4 or 5 weight that was 9 foot long, and it was still lighter than its fiberglass counterpart that was shorter. So it's just new materials, and you kind of see it now. I mean, they're messing around with boron and there's some other materials. Now you've got some rod companies that are looking at materials that are either recyclable or they're more earth friendly. And so they're trying to kind of push the envelope on what rods can be built with that don't have the same impact that graphite or even fiberglass has.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess it's probably a societal thing, or like you said, war, something weird happens, or a new material is discovered, Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you a quick story. So I was up on the Manistee River 2 weeks ago for trout camp, and there was a sweet drift boat coming by, and these guys, you could tell they had every toy you could possibly want. Handmade boat out of wood that just looked like $1 million, a drift boat that I wouldn't even want to put it in the water. It looks like it needs to be on display somewhere, And I asked them, like, hey, I was waiting, I wasn't in a boat. And I was like, it's kind of like golfing. You mind if I fish through, They're like, yeah, there's nothing in those holes. We've already fished those. And there's nothing there. I was like, all right, I'll just fish through and walk by, and I had Barclay's tiny little rod, and they had all these huge rods, I was hoping to catch a huge trout on this Barclay rod. I want to put the bend in it, It's so I go by and I watch this guy fish this hole. He couldn't pull anything up, and then I don't have like real expensive gear, my Barclay rod's probably the most expensive thing that I own outside of my guitar. But I was like, all right, I'm gonna fish this hole with this Barclay rod. And they probably think this is chump, he's probably whatever. So I passed him up, and I was using this rod. Oh my God, that rod's so amazing. And so I hooked this sweet brown on a little tiny little fly, and it was so like fulfilling to catch that fish in front of them, And so when they're coming by, like, hey, well, what kind of rod is that? And all of a sudden they want to talk to me because they realized they knew what I was doing. And so they're like, what kind of rod is that? A bamboo rod? And I was like, no, this is glass, bro. It was a cool experience, to catch a fish, because usually the timing doesn't work out. It's usually I'm the guy in the boat and someone else walks by and catches something, And
I think that's the neat part about using glasses. I remember years ago, like I'd walk through a parking lot, with an obvious glass rod. It'd be bright white or bright yellow, whatever. And guys, you could see them like pointing and kind of snickering. And it's those same guys that I'll get emails now or DMs on Instagram, like, I need a new 3-weight or I need a new 4-weight. What do you think of, I want to try glass. And so it's just like you had that experience with that Barclay rod. I would bet one of those guys in that pimped out drift boat are going to be like, I want to try a glass rod. It just leaves that impression And especially in those light line weights, a 3, 4, or 5 weight is perfect for glass.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. Now you work in a very stressful environment. You work, your job is you're constantly on, your stress environment. Is that the reason that you started the Fiberglass Manifesto? Were you trying to escape something, or you just felt the need to preach fiberglass to people?
Well, years ago, and I may have mentioned it, but this month, or excuse me, September, TFM hits 12 years. And so if you back up before that, a couple years before that, I was in the Fiberglass Fly Rodders Forum, and there was a chat room on Sunday night. And so I'm in law enforcement, and there was another guy that would always show up on Sunday nights for our Sunday night chats, and he is a police officer in Wyoming. And so we'd always chat back and forth, and he was a rod builder, and I had just like an immense interest in glass rods. And there was one night where everybody else left the chat room, and he and I were talking back and forth. And this was before really the advent of a lot of the online magazines. And so he was like, hey, it'd be really neat if, there was something that we could do that we could really start talking about all these contemporary rod builders that are out there. Because at that point, truly, there was only like maybe a dozen different rod makers or rod companies that offered glass. And so in the Fiberglass Fly Rodders Forum, there was some talk about contemporary glass, but a lot of the focus was on vintage glass. So like your Wright and McGill or Shakespeare, right, or, all these or Phillipsons and Winstons of old. But then there was kind of this really slow wave that was kind of building up that was all your contemporary rod builders. And so he's like, hey, it'd be really neat if there was something out there that would talk about like all these new builders. And so I was like, I wonder what we would call something like that. And like immediately he types the Fiberglass Manifesto. And I was like, oh, that is really cool. And so we just like let it, he's a cop, I'm a cop. Like we have no like knowledge about how to start an online magazine or even what to do. Right. And so for like, there was like 2 or 3 months where like we didn't do anything with it. But like that name like stuck in my head. Yeah. And so there's one day like I like emailed him and it was like, hey, do you care if I try to do something with that name, Fiberglass Manifesto? And he's like, no, go ahead. And so I remember I like did a Google search for like how to start a blog. And at that point, I didn't know about like Midcurrent. I didn't know about Moldy Chum or Trout Underground or all of these like OG bloggers that were already out there. And so like it completely like opened my mind. Like there was this entirely different like online media that I was unaware of. And started TFM without much like idea of what I want to do with it other than talk about glass rods. And it just kind of built over the years. It built, I would post something every 3 or 4 days or once a week, and then got more serious about it and was more interested in, along with like a dozen rod builders, like it started growing. Like there was different rod builders or a different rod company. Fast forward a couple years, and we started seeing companies like Orvis and Redington. They were bringing out glass rods that either didn't bring them out before, or it was something that they were bringing back. And so it just kind of built. And so it was kind of perfect timing without it even being like planned perfect timing, right? That TFM started. And then there was just like this interest from within the fly fishing industry about glass rods. And in turn, anglers were like, oh, fiberglass or fly rods can be made out of fiberglass. And so there was more interest there as well. And it's just continued to grow and grow and grow. And what's kind of cool is fast forward 12 years and you're seeing companies that are, like Redington's had a couple generations of their glass rod. Orvis has had a really great generation with theirs. Looking at future generation of what's coming, Echo's had several generations. I mean, so it's kind of like built up. And TFM's been there for the ride. And it's, aside from what I do, full time as a career, TFM's been a great diversion where it's opened me up to, have an opportunity to talk to people like you and also other people in the industry, like have friends that I would never have had before. Right. And working in public safety, it's good to have friends and people that you talk to outside of that bubble, because you can really get sucked into, a very narrow mindset where, everybody thinks in and does the same thing. And it's so great. It's been so great for me to have people outside of that realm that it's been a healthy situation. That with a really great home life, been married for 20 plus years, have children and try to stay engaged that way. Have always made a promise to myself that I would never get too sucked down the rabbit hole of what a life in law enforcement is, and always keep in perspective, like there's things going on in the world outside of what I do, day in and day out.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine it would be easy to get sucked into that world. It's almost a very it seems like an isolated world. I have several friends who are pastors, and it's like kind of the same thing. You have to, you have to have this, you can't just put your guard down and just be who you are. You got to have this, thing going on. And it's funny because, we have some that will attend trout camp with us. And we had one this year, actually, a guy and my buddy, we were in the pickup, we're on our way to trout camp. And my accountant Phil's like, brought this guy and we were talking in the truck and he's like, I was like, so what do you do for work? And he goes, well, I'm a pastor, and I was like, well, look, I mean, I drink a lot and I cuss a lot when I'm at trout camp and I want to be myself and I have a good time, and that's what it's going to be. And I was kind of mad at accountant Phil. I'm like, why are you bringing this guy? Because, whatever, because I have a very complicated past with religion, but the guy turned out to be an amazing guy. And he actually is a friend, I felt like he's my friend. And, but what he said around the fire is like, sometimes I just want to let my guard down and just be one of the guys, and I think, I don't know, I'm assuming because I've never been a police officer, but my father was a pastor, I come from a ministry family where you almost like live in a glass house all the time, and you got to do a certain thing. So I would assume that would be kind of a similar, you're in the service industry, like we talked about earlier, serving. And I think that's probably something similar, to that profession as well.
For sure. And so it's always been good to have friends outside of that. It's good for me. It's healthy for me to have friends with different perspectives and different backgrounds, because it helps me as a police officer see things in different perspective.
Oh, sure.
I think too often, if you always surround yourself with people that think the very same way, you're not going to have that same perspective as if you see things from different backgrounds and different experiences. So that's been really helpful for me, for the past, 20 plus years that I've been law enforcement, is to always have, people outside of that circle in my circle.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. I see your decal, the red one, the circle. I see that thing everywhere, dude. I see that's, I have one on my rod case. Barclay or Aaron Reed put one in his book. I don't know if you saw his book, but there's one of your badges there, and it's everywhere, man. And I think it's really cool to see what's become of TFM, and how you guys have grown. You said 12 years, right?
12 years. And in fact, and this is just kind of, I haven't put this out there yet, but in the next week or two, I'm going to kick off like a 12 weeks of giveaways, and they're going to all be sponsored each week. Each week of the 12 weeks is going to be sponsored by a different rod company or rod builder.
Oh, nice.
And there's going to be some other sponsors involved. So longtime readers will remember the 12 weeks of Christmas, and there were like 24 hours of contests that went. And so a contest would start, and by the next day it had ended, and there were like significant prizes each day. And so what I thought would be really fun to celebrate 12 years is to do week-long giveaways, but then reach back at old content and bring it back, and like old interviews, and like talk about, how different companies, if the week focuses on Orvis, like go back and talk about, how they brought glass back and what glass in the 70s was and what it is in the 2000s. And then like I've been up to the rod shop and hung out in Vermont, at the mothership with everybody, and bring those posts back, and then do a giveaway through that week. The next week might jump to, echo fly fishing, and the next week might be swift fly fishing, and the next week will be, Barclay. And so instead of it being, really quick in 12 days, it's going to be drawn out. It's going to be 12 weeks. So if we start next week or the week after, we're going to be going through the end of December into January to get those 12 weeks in. But it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be some great giveaways, and it's going to be fun for me to kind of look back over the last 12 years and, pull back and do new interviews, and, hopefully bring some new readers in that maybe haven't experienced glass yet.
Well, that's great. Well, we'll be sure to put your links down below, Cameron. This is going to probably air after you've ran a couple of your giveaways, but we'll be sure to give you a shout out when you start those giveaways. So be sure to click down below to the Fiberglass Manifesto link. It's .com, right? Fiberglassmanifesto.com. Yep. We're going to put that link down below. Also links to your socials as well and to your giveaways. That's a sweet hat you have on there.
I know, these are brand new. I'm getting ready to do pre-orders on them. I've had people ask me for hats for years, and I've really not found a hat that I thought was kind of worthy of doing an actual hat offering with. And this summer I got introduced is a Richardson hat that it's nice because you can kind of keep it flat brimmed, or you can, bend it. Some people wear them that way, and it's a lightweight and durable hat. So it kind of is a hat that I think everybody can enjoy wearing, except I had some people already today when I posted on Instagram that wondered if I was going to have something that didn't have the mesh in the back for people that are bald. So I'm going to have to figure out something for that. But so I'll be kicking those off soon too. And it's fun to kind of see where they end up, all over the world. So just like the stickers, you said you see Comrade stickers everywhere. It's always fun to see where different apparel pieces and different stickers end up on people's rod tubes and fish cars. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I saw that you posted those new hats online. That's why I gave you a big shout out to that, because they are sweet. Thank you.
Gonna be pretty sweet. So you guys can check out all of Cameron Mortenson's merch and his swag at his website, the fiberglassmanifesto.com. Cameron, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I hope that steak is, what do they say in the great outdoors, is the old 96er is processing nicely. So Dan Aykroyd says that. I hope that's fun. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, man. I really appreciate it, Cameron. And we'll be sure to put up links, and thank you so much.
Thanks for bringing me back. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and it's kind of neat this time because it's on Zoom. So I guess it'll be out there on YouTube this time around as well.
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube and all the channels that people can download. But thanks again. Appreciate it, Cameron.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Remote No Pressure Podcast. Thank you, Cameron, for hanging out with us this week. Be sure to go to our website at remotenopressure.com. Check out some of the items that we have there. Like I said in the beginning of the podcast, everything you buy helps support the podcast. Also, subscribe. We're picking up some new subscribers on our YouTube channel. We're really trying to build out the YouTube. We get tons of downloads, but our YouTube channel, we're working on it. Maybe you have some ideas for some content for our YouTube channel. Be sure to email me at jefft@remotenopressure.com. We're always looking for new content ideas, but whatever we can do to grow that channel, we're looking to do that. So if you are on YouTube, on the YouTube, like we call it around here, be sure to go online and subscribe to us. Thank you so much for hanging out. And until next time, go fishing.